Yes, please stick around. You can share the mic. So if you want to ask some questions, please step up to, we need to give you a mic. So step up to the mic. So while you're thinking, let me ask you a couple of questions. So, Steve, back to you. So you talked about this acquisition. In terms of this partnering, I mean, when you first met with Richard, you know, how important was getting an exit to this whole thing? I mean, how did that all work?
Well, how important was the exit? Extremely, because I think, you know, we were doing it for six and a half years, and you know, that's a long time doing a startup. You know, I basically when we started, I told my wife, every credit card application comes in the door, you fill it out and send it in. And so, you know, the government didn't believe us one year when we paid everything on credit cards. So it was that, you know, that kind of gets a little bit tiring, and we were ready to do something new. So we couldn't show how much we wanted to do it, and we had to play that a little bit to support.com, but it was really important for us to get the exit, for sure.
Good. Sean?
Steve, I was just wondering, did you ever think about going public before somebody came along and offered to buy you?
It's funny you ask. Actually, we did, and we actually hired a firm here in town to help us do an IPO, and spent about $120,000 trying to do that, and finally decided that that wasn't the way to go. We were being sold a line of goods that we thought they wanted more than we did, and decided not to go ahead and do it. So it was a great learning experience. We did a prospectus and all that kind of stuff, but spent way too much money doing it, and it was very distracting as well.
Can I ask quickly, what are you two guys doing now? Because you're no longer with support.com.
No. I'm doing a social platform and mobile apps for social action, social advocacy, more focused on the nonprofit world, but more around people's passions for how they can get engaged. I think in Silicon Valley, I think it would be called a lifestyle business. It's not a venture-backed startup, but it's meant to connect people and their passions with what causes they want to do.
And for me, I actually just started the company, incorporated in beginning of July. So it's complicated. I don't have my pitch yet, but it's a consumer security desktop app that runs and protects your social media, and it does it through a 3D animated character on your desktop.
Hi, can I switch over to the Xomo story? Two questions, I guess. First of all, how did Vanoc make money from this, and how did Xomo make money from the whole event? How did you measure success? I know you said you must have been a gift from God that He walked in on you in July 2009, and you had no idea that this was going to happen. So. How do you measure the success? And last question for Jeff. How did you have the nerve to go to Vanoc when Vanoc seemed to be so hard to get into? I mean, at least that was the story that was going around town. And not so much Vanoc, but the IOC.
Yeah. Those are some great questions. In terms of how do we make money, it's almost the other way around. It's like, how did we not spend money, is really how we do it. So the easiest example is on the print publication. So typically we would have done, I can't even remember what the print run was, but it was substantial. It was budgeted as one of the major print runs that we would ever do. And I think we cut that literally in half. In fact, we may have even cut it about 80%. Because we just didn't need to do that much of it. So that was a major savings there. The other way that we account for, and it's interesting, the conversation earlier about accounting, and how do you account for things. The other way that we would attribute value towards it would be in terms of what exposure we were able to give to sponsors and partners. So for example, for Bell, that was a great benefit to be able to give them. One that they weren't necessarily budgeting, not one that we had explicitly offered or promised, but you are able to go through and draw some models that say, if we had been charging for this, this is how much it would have cost. And then you've got this other negotiation with them about the whole organization in general. So you're able to sort of account for things and able to demonstrate a positive variance and make some cash costs go away.
And we probably have to change our ROI model then, because we weren't counting the savings on print just in the ROI. That was just the difference between what Vanak paid Xomo and what what Vanak was able to get from Bell in terms of cash to get the sponsorship going. But yeah, so maybe the ROI should be more than 5 times, but I haven't factored that in. So success metrics, definitely downloads and just overall usage. It definitely, Vanak wanted to be seen as a very progressive organization, and that was one thing that helped it become more innovative in a lot of people's minds, which I think is overall, that's really one of the key success metrics there. It made everyone look good when the app was able to help people in that way and help people around the world too. And in terms of your other question was, why did Xomo do it? We had a mission to do the Olympic app, so we were going to do it one way or another. The fact that they paid us for it was a bonus, I guess.
Well, if I could just sort of touch on a theme, something that Steve said earlier too. He said he had a lot of luck, but a lot of hard work too. And I think same thing. I mean, there was some luck involved in this from both sides, both for Xomo and for Vanak, but also a lot of hard work.
Yeah, a lot of people thought we were kind of suicidal. So that was...
You, sir?
So I've got a question for both cases. The first one for Steve and Richard. If you look at the acquisition, and a lot of it was for expertise and not as much on the revenue side, how did you come to a valuation? Was there a big gap in valuation, and how did you overcome that gap?
I think we said it. Well, first we looked at it from the, there's classic valuation models of, X times earnings or X times EBITDA or whatever. We use those kind of to get into a ballpark, but we also knew that first of all they were small and private, so there were some funny things there. What we did was specifically we had some goals in terms of gross margin calculations on the services that we thought by scaling what these guys did we could do at scale at support.com. We then extrapolated that out into revenue, how it might affect EPS over a certain period of time, and then backed into a valuation for that. Right. So we actually, and they never saw any of that, and probably to this day probably never even realized that any of that existed, but we actually were pretty rigorous. And so when we went back to them with a number, we actually knew kind of what the boundaries were, and we knew that we could go to Wall Street and say, if this happens, in this case from a gross margin point of view, it will affect EPS going forward, such and such and such, and we could hold the story together.
And was it always acquisition, or was there ever talk about a partnership, customer vendor?
No, I think we were always talked about acquisition. Yeah, definitely. And for us, from a valuation standpoint, when we got to our number, it was more of we wanted a return for our investors because we did have angel investors, so we wanted to make sure we got a return, and they understood that and gave it to us.
Okay. Yeah. Can we just ask this gentleman to? Yeah.
There's a question for Steve. So you said your company was small when it was acquired, and you had about 30 employees. Can you just shed some light as to what was the scale of your company when it was acquired? And the second question that stems out from it was, you said that you were limited in the scalability of your business, and you were looking for support.com to come in and take over and make it scale. Like, you were looking for opportunities for scaling it further. So, well, what were the possible reasons you think you were limited on scalability?
Well, money, number one, because we were all angel funded and running out of money quickly. It was hard to raise money, especially in a services business, because that's primarily what we were, right? And we were doing less than $1 million in revenue at the time. We did have a spike one year. We were doing 2.5 or close to $3 million in revenue, and then it came down. So scale, we had the opportunity to have big OEM customers and large retailers, but the large retailers wanted to know that we had money behind us, and VCs didn't want to back a services company. So we really had a big challenge, and I saw that in 2005 and knew that's one of the reasons why we knew we had to go the acquisition route, and because we needed that money behind us to be able to make our partners feel more comfortable to do business with us. It's not that we could prove and show the model worked, but a company like Dell, who gets 1 million calls a month and could turn 1% of those over to us, would crush us. So we needed their resources and money to help us scale.
So actually, we're going to have to cut it off at this point. I'm sorry. We have another session coming up. So these gentlemen will be outside the door, and if you approach them nicely, I'm sure they can answer your questions personally. So thank you very much.